but last time what we talked about was the difference between a pension and a 401k, some of the basics of pension accounting, and ultimately kind of hinted at some of the ideas of what some of the issues are with your pension in a way that we could engage to try to improve the funded status of your pension over time. This presentation is going to be a little different. That one was a little more kind of technical stuff. But what this is about is like Matt said, I think we all know that pensions are under attack. We've been seeing this for years now, and but we don't always see where exactly that's coming from. There's a lot of money, there's a lot of time and a lot of effort being put into changing the public conversation about pensions to make them into something bad. And this is about undermining the existence of pensions altogether. And I want us to understand who is actually orchestrating this and what strategies and tactics they're using. So the three key points that I wanted to make and make sure that everyone understands today is one, that it's the financial industry that views your pension as a threat. When pensions are coming under attack, it happens in a lot of different ways, and we'll talk about those different ways, but it's overwhelmingly under attack by the same people. The second thing is that they're paying a lot of money to attack pensions. They're playing a long game when it comes to eliminating pensions, but ultimately we've been successful in fighting back, and unions have been at the forefront of that. And then the final thing is that the public sector, partly because we're highly unionized, is the last line of defense in maintaining pensions and the continued existence of pensions in our economy. So the folks that are attacking, I wanted to start with this to give some context and to give us a sense of how important this fight is for us, because they are trying to create a world where pensions no longer exist. And they've been remarkably successful in doing that in the private sector. And in the public sector, it's still the norm. They haven't been as successful, but they're going to try. But I wanted to show you the world that they're creating. So this is defined contribution plans and defined benefit plans over time. The defined benefit pension plans are in blue. Workers covered under a defined contribution plan, a 401k, is in the orange line. This is for the private sector. This doesn't include public sector numbers. But what you're seeing here is that at its peak, at their peak, 40% of workers in the private sector were covered by defined benefit pension plans. That number over time has declined to around just above 10%. And slowly they've been replaced with these defined contribution plans with 401ks. And so now in the private sector, like I said, defined benefit pensions are still in existence for about 10% of workers, whereas for state and local government workers, 75% have a pension still. This is another way of looking at that same information. This is, these bars here are broken down by age group. The green bars are defined benefit pensions. The yellow bars are 401ks. And really what you're seeing here is that for younger folks, for people between the ages of 25 and 34, they're half as likely as their parents to have a defined benefit pension. So when 401ks were first sold to the American people, they were overwhelmingly presented as a secure form of retirement that would allow you to move from job to job. It'll allow workers to have flexibility. But that has turned out to really be a lie. And now that we have this economy where most workers are in a 401k, this is ultimately what retirement savings look like. So the sad reality is that the majority of American workers actually have no retirement plan at all. But even for folks who are covered under some retirement plan, that's a 401k or a pension, but overwhelmingly these folks are in 401ks, the average household with a retirement plan has $50,000 in retirement savings. And when you think about that, that's not even, that will last you maybe a year, right? It depends on your standard of living, but that's nowhere near the 18 to 20 year benefit that most workers need. When you include all households in the US, average retirement savings is $2,500. So this is horrifying, right? What this means is that in this world where 401ks are the norm, many people are never going to retire. They're going to have to keep working because they just don't have the savings. Of course, they'll have Social Security, but Social Security typically only replaces about 40% of your income. And most retirement advisors suggest that you have around 75% of your income when you were working. So this is why pensions are so important. Because if they die with us, they die for the entire middle class. And this world becomes the reality for all of us. So now that we have some context, onto the big question, which is, why does Wall Street hate your pension at all? Like, what is their issue? You'd think that they actually love pension plans because it's a lot of money that's on the market. They get to manage investments for these pension plans. So what's their deal? You'd think it would be good for business for them. But the thing is, first of all, if all of that money that was in pension plans was instead in 401ks and these individualized retirement funds, and all of us were paying really high fees to Wall Street, that would be even better for business, right? And the other thing is that pension funds are collectively managed by folks who are often full-time fund managers. And when we have 401ks that we manage on our own, we have full-time jobs, we have lives. We're relatively passive investors. Whereas in pension funds, they actually hold Wall Street accountable. They hold corporations accountable. And Wall Street doesn't want them to be able to throw their weight around in that way on behalf of working people. And the second thing, which is a little more complicated point, but we're going to talk about it in detail, is that investors see pensions as something that crowds out their ability to get paid high returns on their investments. As I'm sure a lot of you know, local governments, the main way that they finance new buildings, development projects, is by issuing bonds or financial instruments that are purchased by Wall Street investors. And pensions are viewed by these investors as something that competes with their interest. And we'll go through a detailed example of what I mean by that. But to start with, Wall Street can think whatever they want, but why do elected officials care? And the thing is, they have a lot of avenues to influence local government and to influence elected officials that control your budget and that have influence over your pension. So I wanted to talk about credit ratings for a second. Credit ratings, you can think of it kind of like a city's credit score. If you don't have a good credit rating, it's pretty hard to do anything. You can't borrow money cheaply. You'll have high interest rates. You might not be able to attract investment at all if you have a bad credit rating. There are 3 companies that do credit ratings for local governments. It's Moody's, Standard & Poor's, and Fitch. And really, they have a huge amount of power over a city's ability to borrow money. And so because of this, credit ratings have become a kind of stand-in metric for a city's fiscal health. When elected officials are trying to assess, is the budget in good shape? Where do we need to cut things in the budget? They're kind of they're looking at what investors think and how the ratings agencies are going to react. So when we go into bargaining, we do usually look at these credit ratings to get a sense of where the city is at financially. But we look at them. It doesn't mean that these are totally fair and impartial statements. So I wanted to give you an example of the consequences of what can happen when a city has a bad credit rating, when one of these agencies that communicates to Wall Street investors the credit worthiness of the city decides that there's a problem. So one example is Chicago Public Schools, which has the lowest credit rating for any school district in the country. They're at a B+ rating, which is 15 steps below the top rating, a AAA rating. So they have this low credit rating, but which suggests that they're likely to default on their payments to bondholders. But that's what it's suggesting. But the reality is, the last default that they had was in World War II. It was during World War II. The state actually has unlimited authority to raise property taxes to prevent the district from going into default on the money they owe to investors. But Chicago's business elite, there was this business roundtable of folks in the Chicago business community, and they openly said that they pressured the ratings agencies to give Chicago Public Schools a low bond rating because of their pension. And so what's happening is that this ends up costing Chicago Public Schools $290 million annually because they have this low bond rating, so their interest rates are really high if they want to borrow money. Another example is New Jersey, the state of New Jersey. They have an AA3 rating, which is 6 steps below a AAA rating. And again, the stated reason is their pension obligations. The state actually cannot go bankrupt. A US state can't file for bankruptcy because they have unlimited authority to raise taxes. So instead of defaulting, they would have to raise taxes. They've never defaulted because they can't. But still, they're losing around $220 million annually because of this credit rating. And once again, the pension is the main reason that the ratings agencies gave for giving them a low rating. And just in case, because I know some folks might think, okay, well maybe these ratings agencies are just like really, really cautious and they always look at the worst case scenario. Just for comparison, Lehman Brothers, which collapsed into bankruptcy in 2008, in September of 2008, had an A1 credit rating until July of 2008. Washington Mutual, which collapsed into bankruptcy in 2008 also, maintained a higher credit rating than both New Jersey and Chicago Public Schools through the end of 2007, when they were finally downgraded, despite the fact that everyone knew that they were in trouble. The problems were incredibly clear, and eventually they collapsed into bankruptcy in 2008. So the point here is that these ratings are not necessarily impartial. They're representing a specific set of interests. And what they're communicating is that if you have a pension, we're going to make that